When you were a child, you needed the attention of your parents. Not just for food and shelter, but for your emotions, which you needed them to recognize and see when you were struggling. They needed to guide you with this. That's what parenting is. But when parents dismiss their children's feelings and ignore their needs, it can set you up not only to get together with partners who dismiss you too, but you can end up dismissing yourself. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Lori, and she writes, "Hi, Anna. When I was 17, after years of emotional neglect, I started dating a guy who was less than ideal, smoking, drug dealing, and in debt." All right, I've got my fairy pencil. I'm going to go through and circle things I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's go through and see what's going on for Lori. She says, "It was a horrible relationship. He cheated on me after only a week. But then after a few weeks, I took him back. We were together a couple of months then, and eventually he took my virginity. But maybe a week after that, he ghosted me. We were supposed to meet somewhere, and I waited for 3 hours, but he never showed up. He knew where I lived, so he could have come to my house, but he never did. I was devastated, especially because he never said anything about what happened to him and just had me worry and wonder. Then a while later, I ran into him in town with his ex, and they were back together. I felt so hurt and discarded and abandoned. It was horrible, but I pretended I didn't care. When he was single again and homeless, I took him back again and convinced my parents to let him move in with us, probably because I was worried about losing him again, even though he was not relationship material at all. My parents accepted, on my dad's condition that I wouldn't have a relationship with him under his roof. Right, okay. I lied and I said I wouldn't. I really cringe about all this looking back on it, taking him back after what he did, letting him move in and lying to my dad. It was a very rocky relationship and I didn't even want to be in it. Yeah. I learned to sort of dissociate while we were together and didn't enjoy his company. He was smoking weed and cigarettes all the time and playing video games while I was going to university. So our lives were completely incompatible, and because he had cheated on me twice now, because he got back with his ex without breaking up with me, he started getting very paranoid about me and accusing me of cheating. He came to my door a couple of times, accusing me, and the whole relationship just turned emotionally abusive with lots of needless arguments where I just tried to placate him. Of course, my dad also had found out that we were dating, so he was upset with me too. I hated my situation, but he was so fragile and volatile that I was worried he would hurt himself if I would break up with him. So I kept it going for a while. Finally, I got the courage to break up. He had moved out by now, but I was still living with my parents, so my dad was there when the conversation happened. And by that time, I was so shy and withdrawn and broken that my words came out really awkwardly. Afterward, my dad said, "Wow, you're so bad at that." But he never took time to coach me, she says, or support me. I think he was still angry about me lying to him. Meanwhile, my parents had built a friendship with him and they stayed friends with him after we broke up. He was my mom's project because she had helped him get his life back on track while he was living with us. He came over several times a week. But I didn't want to see him, I pleaded with my parents that I didn't want him there. But they said it was my decision to bring him into their life, and now it was up to them to decide if they wanted to keep it that way. And that was that. This continued for years. I felt like a prisoner in my own house. Then we went on a family vacation like we did every year, but they had invited him to come along without asking me if that would be okay with me. So we all went on vacation, and he was smoking around us all the time, and he was flirting with me, even though I made it clear I was not into it. And then on the final day of the holiday, after he had been flirting again, I finally couldn't take it anymore and snapped at him in a restaurant. My parents were mad at me because I had caused a scene, and they said I had ruined our family holiday. But they never held themselves or him accountable. The year after, they brought him along on holiday again, and that time I just let them go without me. His visits went on for years and still happen occasionally, but less frequently than before. She's 42 now. She was 21 back then when she left. Wow. As a result, I've never gotten into a relationship since then. I developed strong codependent tendencies, and I second guess my intuition, which has led to people taking advantage of me many times. I also moved abroad since about the age of 21. So all of that happened before you were 21, which I think has something to do with how I didn't feel safe at home and my parents. Yeah. And I was estranged from my sister for many years. We've only recently reconnected. Since that holiday, I've confronted my parents a couple of times about how much they hurt me in that period of my life, but they don't seem to understand that it was wrong for them to keep contact and force me to stay in touch with an ex and even bring him on a holiday. They just say I should get over it and that I'm making a big deal out of nothing. They think they have been wonderful parents. I'm 42 now, and my parents are still friends with him, and he still comes to our house occasionally. What is reasonable in this situation? What is your opinion about how they handled the situation while I was dating him and after, with the frequent visits and the holiday? And what do you think of the current situation? Am I asking too much by saying my parents should not invite him over when I'm around? Am I too controlling because it's their house and their rules? Is the situation different then versus now, in your opinion? I hope you can help me provide me with some clarity, because my whole family, parents and sister, insist that I'm still overreacting while I think I'm being perfectly reasonable, and I don't understand why they just can't see my point of view. Thank you so much for all you do, Lori. Okay. Wow. So I just got to tell you, Lori, I think one of the reasons I was drawn to your letter is because my family did something similar, not with a boyfriend or ex-boyfriend of mine, but with my sisters, 2 of them. And they went on family vacations, and they even got money to go to college, and we never got a penny. And I have always felt confused by that. And you know what I say when other people say they're confused? It's like, you're in denial. It's terrible. That's terrible behavior. Your parents are really missing something here. So it's dismissive. They have dismissed your feelings. And I think the big red flag shows up early in your story. When you're 17, you've barely been dating a guy. He's homeless, and you want him to live at the house. Now, what were your parents thinking that this guy should come live at your house when they have a 17-year-old daughter? It's like, okay, but no hanky-panky. Okay, Dad. I'm sorry. That's some very serious abdication of responsibility, and just trying to wave a magic wand of not having to deal with something uncomfortable. What on earth was motivating them to let this guy in? He's such bad news, and it's hard to believe that they could be totally unaware of how he was treating you, or at least what you were saying about it and how you felt. So absolutely, parents, that is their job. And you were in late teenagehood. What were you? You were 17. So they need to be listening to you, supporting you, setting boundaries with you and for you. And when you're doing something stupid, they don't let you. That's what good parenting is. I circled so many things. Let's see. So he cheated on you after a week. Then you took him back after a few weeks. Then a couple months later, he took your virginity. Then a week later, ghosted you. He was back with his girlfriend, wouldn't tell you anything, didn't bother to tell you, and you were devastated. And then a while later, you ran into him with his ex, and they were back together. And when he was single again, when he was now homeless, you took him back. So that's a really self-destructive choice, but you did it while you were living at your parents, and they knew, and you convinced your parents to let him move in with you, probably because you were worried about losing him again. I see. So he moved in here a little later in that whole process. Your dad's fake reaction, you're sitting there feeling guilty about lying to your dad, but the thing is, as a 17-year-old, I don't know. It's your dad's responsibility to set the limit on that. It was, and your mom's. It was a very rocky relationship. You didn't want to be in it. You dissociated in order to deal with being with him, and totally incompatible. You were going to university. Yeah, and he had cheated on you twice, and then he accused you that it was your fault and you were the cheater, and the whole relationship became emotionally abusive with needless arguments where You were just trying to placate him. So it wasn't good for you. It was unhealthy. And I can't think of anything worse for a young adult than to be sort of trapped in a sick relationship like that with their parents, not only blessings, but their parents almost pulling the strings. So you hated the situation, but he was so fragile and volatile. I worried he would hurt himself if I broke up with him. And I know that fear. I had a guy actually do it in the past. And for a while after that, that was my core fear. And of course, the first person that I even tried to date started threatening and making noises that if I broke up, that's what he was going to do. And so I kind of went through the same like sickening, sticking around. But luckily then I drew a boundary. And who even knows what happened to him, but later I had to call the cops on him. What a disaster. So I had been through a very bad period of my life. And, when things are hard like that and there's nobody like in your corner and nobody to back you up and help you be strong and help you see the truth of a situation, it's so easy to fall into a boundaryless kind of hell. And so there you were. And by that time you were shy, withdrawn, and broken, so broken that your words came out awkwardly when you broke up with him. But you did it, girl, you did it. You broke up with him, and then your dad criticized you for it. He didn't support you. He didn't coach you on how to do it. Then you said, oh, I think he was angry about lying. I'm sorry. When you're a parent of teenagers, stuff like that's going to happen. That doesn't mean you stop parenting. That doesn't mean you abandon them. I don't think it was anything you did, Lori. Meanwhile, my parents had built a friendship with him. Now, this is the part that just like takes the cake. He was coming over several times a week. And what'd they do? Sit around watching TV? So by that time, I guess you were in college and you were living there, I assume, for financial reasons. And you said you felt like a prisoner in your own home. And I guess at that point you could move out. But I do understand if the arrangement was you would live there while finishing college. That's often the only way a family can afford that kind of thing. So if that was the plan, what on earth were they doing? Do they have no friends? It just seems like for them to befriend this guy, they must have had no friends. And he was probably like, I don't know, jolly or something. And, oh, hey, Mr. and Mrs. whatever your last name is. God, I don't know. So he went on vacation and he kept hitting on you. And when you finally got angry with him at a restaurant, your parents said, you ruined the family holiday. You ruined it. You're supposed to be silent and go along with our crazy scheme, right? So they didn't hold themselves accountable. So next time they went without you. So now time has passed and you moved away to another country, but you haven't been able to get into a real relationship since then. Strongly codependent tendencies, and you second guess your intuition. Yeah, those are some very common symptoms that I notice tend to go hand in hand with people who were not seen as people by their parents. Yeah, not feeling safe. You are right. And being estranged from your sister even. Like, how did you become the bad guy and all that? Were you just so mean? I don't know. I'm projecting. I think they saw me as mean, but I was angry. This was like crazy stuff that was going on. So you confronted them. They're like, what are you're too serious. Why are you so upset? You're being silly. And the sister's ganging up on you with them. Oh, please. I'm on your side, Lori. And I think the commenters are probably going to let you know that they are too. So what's reasonable? Well, at this point that you're 42 and they're still friends with him and he's still hanging around, I don't know the point of telling him that you don't want them to have him over when you're there. They don't care. I think you've said your piece. If there's anything you haven't said, tell them. And then I would just say, when you go home to visit, don't stay with them, or don't go home. This is an egregious situation. I can hear that you must want a relationship with them, that you've put up with it this long. You are not being too controlling. It's a very reasonable boundary. And at this point, I'm sure you don't care as much about this jerk who, kind of wrecked your confidence and your family, but it's that your family is still doesn't believe in you enough to take a stand and make space for you and respect your very understandable wishes, very appropriate wishes. And they're normalizing hurtful, disrespectful behavior to you. They just to them, that's like okay and normal. And so some kind of dehumanization happened along the way there. I'm really sorry. That is just absolute crap. Yeah, you're a human and you were a girl and no one stood up for you. So you wanted to know what I thought, and I don't think you're being unreasonable. I don't know if you ever talked to a therapist about this, but it's boundary time, and I don't know if you're going to keep having contact with them. But one thing a lot of people do, when I teach people, when they have difficult relatives or family members that they want to maintain a relationship with, is to use ninja boundaries. I call them that. And these are boundaries where you plan in advance. Do I want to see them? Well, okay, if you want to see them, the first boundary is you take responsibility. I've decided to see them. I realize they're difficult. I realize they're not responsive to what I ask for. So I'm going to see them, but I realize they're not going to respect anything that I want and need. And if I go, I'm going on that understanding that it's almost certainly not going to happen. It just seems like after all this time, if they haven't changed, it doesn't seem like very likely that they're going to see the light. So if you go, I understand, but you have to take responsibility. You're deciding to go into that pit. And then have a plan B. If you go there and stuff starts being, whether it's because he's there, or you try to talk to them and it doesn't go well, or it just feels bad because at this point nothing can be redeemed, have a place to stay that's not the house. I know that costs extra money, but I would really recommend having an old friend's house or a motel where you can stay or be ready to go there so that you have a way of keeping distance. I don't know, I kind of like the idea of a motel. And then you limit the time with them. The trouble with staying with people overnight and for several days is, it's a lot of time. You can't really get away from it. You're obliged to be a good guest. But if you're visiting town and you meet at a restaurant or something, you're on equal footing. And you get to have your boundaries. And so that could be something that you can do. I would encourage you to be very clear. What do you still want out of this relationship? Do you want to keep an eye on them as they age? Do you want to let them know you love them? Do you want to work this out with them? All of these are fine. But be clear what you want out of this so that you can sort of keep it in mind. And when you have a break during the day, check in with yourself. Check in with yourself. Like, how am I doing with this goal? One of the goals you might want to set is not to get into conflict with them because of what it will cost you emotionally. Maybe you get dysregulated for days, like many of us do, if you get into an argument. And so you think about what it will cost you and you decide, I'm willing to put up with this much, but no more, not more. And by writing this out and planning it, it helps you make decisions when all your decision-making power sort of goes out the door, because that's what you're talking about. This wound that you're carrying about they dismissed you, when you're around them, I mean, who's not like this? It's like kryptonite. We revert back to our old behaviors so often. I know I do. And I think that's really common. So you might turn into somebody who's helpless, who feels guilty, who's somehow taking responsibility for this, who's still thinking they're going to hear you and do something differently for you. So you can go in kind of more with your eyes open, and a way to keep yourself from getting totally immersed in that like alternative universe of who you used to be. And you can stay out, say hello, connect, spend some time together, and not go into it with them. And that's the gist of it. You don't want to argue about things. The object of the game is to conserve your energy, to enjoy the part that you want and conserve your energy so you don't waste it on the parts that you don't want. And as much as you can, it can help not to tell people that you're using ninja boundaries on them. It's like, I'm going to do this thing. I will leave if you do this. It may come to that where you have to explain that to them. That's okay if you need to. But often when you set a boundary with people who are that selfish, they don't take it well. They just create more grief for you, and it defeats the whole purpose of going to see them. So if you can sort of elegantly go, yeah, I'm pretty tired. I'm going to get a motel this time so that I can get my sleep when I want to, but it'd be great to see you. You want to have lunch tomorrow at Denny's or whatever it is, and then see them. And perhaps they will bring something up, and just, you can handle your side of the street on your terms. And by now, I bet you can predict the various ways that it can go south with them. And so, just think through, what am I going to do if that happens? Would I want to leave the restaurant in a cab if I need to? Would I want to, go leave town and go back home? So if you just kind of have your options in your mind. I remember this won't sound related, but for me it is, when my kids were very small. It helped me to think about consequences if they misbehave. Like if you keep standing there hitting your brother in the head with the toy, if you do that one more time, I have to like rack my brain. What's the consequence? What's the consequence? You're grounded. Well, you don't ground a 2-year-old, do you? So it helped me to think in advance about what are the consequences of that. And when you know what the appropriate consequences is in advance, and I'm not saying punish your parents, but the consequence for you is if this happens, I'm going to go. You quietly have that limit. And you can decide not to observe your limit in the moment if you want to, but knowing some possible options fresh in your mind, write them on a card if you have to. Because when you say you dissociated with this guy, I know exactly what you're talking about. And that means when you get near the problem, you might do it again, and then you can't remember your options. And you sit and suffer. So there's a way for you to take care of yourself, to feel good that you took care of yourself, and to minimize how much drama there is with them about the fact that you did so. And that's what I encourage you to do. So if anybody wants to see my ninja boundaries, I have them on a free download, and you can click and access it right here. And I will see you very soon.